It's the Real Estate Podcast, brought to you by ANZ Home Loans for financial well-beings.
Hey, welcome back to another episode of the Real Estate Breakfast. If you are wanting to increase your real estate knowledge, you have come to the right place this morning, because if you can't find what you need here, it probably doesn't exist, because we are talking property from Cairns to Perth 7 days a week, and we're talking to only real estate experts who are at the top of their field. It's the middle of our working week up to a Wednesday morning, September the 3rd. Coming up shortly, we are going to take you to the US and get a real estate property update from Patrick, who's there. And we have been also talking about people looking for a better lifestyle moving to Dubai. But not all Aussies are keen about moving offshore, preferring to stay in place regardless of the tax they are paying here. But Rebecca has left us a voice message who somewhat disagrees with staying in Australia.
Oh, hello. I just want to say how much I enjoy listening to you, and I've listened to quite a few of your podcasts. Yeah, I'm from Sydney, Australia. I've been backwards and forwards, but last few times I've just seen how much they have accomplished. I have to respond because I just heard you talk about someone from Australia. They're exiting or selling their portfolio for Dubai, and yeah, I completely agree. I've sold my portfolio here. I've purchased a few units off plan in Dubai, and yeah, it's just the way the structure is for the taxation and the work and getting ahead and having a lifestyle. It's just not here for my family and myself. So yeah, we're going to exit, and I plan to do this over the next 18 months or so. We have a very good business here, but I will look at relocating to Dubai. Yeah, there's a lot of advantages, but yeah, I wouldn't recommend Australia to relocate here. It's a very big mistake. If you're looking to get ahead, the safety is not here anymore. The government, the police, the way the world is, I'll be looking forward to exiting. And I've sold my portfolio, and that is going into the UAE.
So, Rebecca is off. Very clear intentions of quitting Australia in favour of the UAE. And if you would like to leave us a voice message, you'll find the link below to record your thoughts. Another country is moving out of the US, and we're going to catch up right now with Patrick Duffy. So yeah, people are checking out Patrick.
It's not that easy to move to other countries. So some people say, oh, you don't like it here, leave. Well, it's not that easy. And when I travel, I always ask myself, could I live here? What are they doing better? What are they doing worse than back home? I think I've talked to you previously to Southeast Asia, and that'll get me up to 44 countries. I have some on my list, would certainly consider if it came to that.
Okay, so rattle off a few of the countries that you're going to.
I'm starting in Southeast Asia in Bangkok. I have a friend who just moved there. So he's actually one of the people we're talking about. He sold his condo in Santa Monica and moved at the beginning of the year. And I said, I'm going to make good on my threat to come visit you. And then I'm going to do a big circle through northern Thailand and then into Laos, over to Vietnam, back to Cambodia, and then to Thailand for a couple days before flying out. So I'm really interested in studying the basics of 4 different languages because I don't want to rely on Google Translate. So I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah, a lot of people have moved into Vietnam. That is one of the countries. Very cheap, of course, comparing it to the US. And that is something that you will no doubt be sort of looking at. Cost of living, the housing market. How interesting.
Yeah, in Vietnam, to your point, it's significantly cheaper than Thailand. Thailand's tourist numbers have been falling this year, and Vietnam's are up. And a lot of it has to do with price.
Well, the US housing market still appears stuck in neutral. Of course, with millions of homeowners holding ultra-low mortgages, they're just simply unwilling to give up the economics, it is just a fact of life. It just does not make sense in many cases. So what is it going to take, Patrick, to finally get this market moving again, do you think?
I think it's going to be lower interest rates. Right now, the rates have dipped, the lowest in 10 months. So that's good. But, they're still in the mid sixes, and they probably need to be a lot lower that to get a lot of people off the sidelines. Fannie Mae came out with a revised forecast this month, and they're not seeing us dipping below 6.5% until 2026. So it's still going to be kind of some rough riding. And so I know builders offer a lot of incentives. You're now seeing that with existing home sellers of existing homes to be able to compete. I know that was just a drop here and there a couple years ago. And now I'm seeing it's becoming a lot more commonplace. So that's a big part of it. And then you also have the lock-in effect. At the end of 2024, Realtor.com estimated that over 80% of homeowners with mortgages has interest rates below 6%. That's now slowly declining because people have to move anyway. Life happens for various reasons. So it could approach 75% by the end of this year. So as that starts to wane, plus you have mortgage rates declining, that could open the market up a bit more. We're certainly going to pay close attention to that.
Now, home buyers, they are stretching themselves financially just to compete, going up against cash-rich investors and an influx of foreign buyers, interestingly enough. What do you think that mean for the market overall? And are there safeguards to ensure US citizens have a fair chance in 2025 on the property market?
Yeah, you raise a good point. Let's say you're a traditional home buyer, first-time home buyer. You've, scrimped and saved to save you 20% down, and you don't have to do a mortgage. But you're being competed against buyers with cash. 31% of transactions in July were cash sales here in the U.S., up from 29% of the previous month and 27% a year ago. And so they're coming in, and 20% of those are individual investors or second home buyers. That's a big bump. 14% the previous month, 13% last July. So they're really jumping in. And then a big portion of this is foreign buyers, which first increase in 8 years that we saw. I think this last year, 78,000 total purchases, up 44% from the previous year. And a lot of those are coming from China, Canada, Mexico, India, and the UK. And where they're buying? Florida, California, Texas, New York, and Arizona. Some states and cities do have some safeguards in place. There's nothing national other than you can't buy agricultural land if you're a foreign buyer, for example. You can't buy near military installations. There's certain safeguards for certain land use types. But as far as I know, there's nothing national for housing. And sometimes builders will limit investors when the market's really strong. They'll limit the investors to try to slow down the roll. But now I haven't seen anything in effect for that. And in fact, some of the builders are selling, large swaths of homes to homes for rent operators to get them off their books. Because if you're a big public builder, you want to just keep your volume up. You want to keep your vendors and your employees chugging ahead and waiting for better times ahead. I think we'll start seeing more of this now that this information's out, but I've not seen anything at the national level yet.
Yeah, and the rental market is also interesting, where developers offered months of free rent to lure the tenants in. Is that trend still continuing, and how is the build-to-rent model reshaping single-family housing at the moment?
They did build, it was mostly apartments, the multifamily that was overbuilt. I think the highest number was under construction since like 1974. It was mostly the South and the West, because that's where everyone was going. The pandemic years, they're going to all these boom towns. And so now they've really cut down on new starts and new construction. They're absorbing that over time. And I think they're looking forward to a much better 2026. It's good for renters. National rent growth, according to Zillow, slowed to 2.6% year over year, down from almost 3% in June. And single family rents about 3.4%. So just a bit over the rate of inflation. But the typical new renter still spends almost 30% of their household on rent. Where you see rents flat or falling, it's the ones where you have the most housing starts. And then a lot of them, as I mentioned before, they are selling to build to rent, because if you've got a family, dogs, and they want a yard, you want to live in an apartment, you can't afford a house, is to rent a single family home. And you might rent from an individual homeowner, landlord, maybe they don't know what they're doing. Maybe it's difficult with management. But in these communities, you have on-site management. You have all of these different amenities on site in addition to what you find in your house. And so that's certainly a very exciting kind of new category that we've seen. Again, there's always the risk of overbuilding, but it's very specific to different markets. I have a client that's building throughout Texas. They're little cottage homes. They're tiny homes for rent, but there's no one living over you. And you got a small yard. And I think they're going to kind of address that affordability issue. How do we get someone they're not spending 30% of their income, hopefully significantly less than that?
Jerome Powell and Trump. Boy, this is such an interesting standoff. The Federal Reserve and Bureau of Labour Statistics both face mounting credibility concerns if the Fed yields to political pressure. So what impact could that have, do you think, on market confidence and the economic stability?
There is a court ruling that's been stayed till it gets to the Supreme Court about whether the president has the ability to assess all these tariffs, which are usually assessed by Congress. And they've sort of just been rubber stamping a lot of this stuff. So that'll be very interesting to see how that plays out. In terms of the Federal Reserve, if you politicize it too much, it could become, it could be economically damaging because, they have a dual mandate. They want to support the job market, but they want inflation to be hopefully close to their 2% level. Today, the Fed's preferred inflation tracker came out and the core inflation rate rebounded to 2.9%. So that's pretty far from 3%. But Powell has indicated he's concerned enough about the job market that we'll probably see a cut next month. People have been betting how much it is. I probably think it's going to be 25 basis points and not 50 because of that inflation going up. And then the BLS, it has been called the gold standard for data. And I've been banging this drum since January. Like, what happened if this gets politicized? Can we create an alternative? Can the private market create an alternative, like a Dow Jones or a Bloomberg? The answer's been like what government does the data. Like, they weren't really looking at what I was looking at. And I don't know if we'll see that. We already have a lot of private market information that we look at for the economy. And that today with AI could scrape websites and, maybe there'll be a methodology. I would say the president does have a fair question on like, how do we look at how the methodology is? If you have these huge revisions every month, so how do we develop a more modern methodology? And I think that's a very worthy question to ask. And hopefully we'll move into that.
Hurricane Katrina, 20 years on. This is the new Netflix doco. Horrific is the word. As it happened, of course, all those years ago, there was so much information that people just were completely oblivious to. What an eye-opening documentary this is, and the filmmakers did such a fantastic job representing all sides. Brad Pitt probably would have absolutely hated the way that right at the end he's been reported with his helping hand with families with these houses which have all turned to custard. But have you seen it?
I've not seen it yet. I know it unveiled a big split between the haves and the have-nots in this country. There's also a big story in the New York Times about the rising cost of going to Disneyland, because there's been such a rise in the number of rich households in this country. That's who a lot of companies are pursuing and, politicians, I guess. So that's more recent. I can't wait to watch it. I'm glad you gave it such a good review. I remember when that happened, I had just bought my second home out in Palm Springs, and I had sitting on the couch with friends all week and just watching this horrific information come in about what was happening.
Yeah, and Bush, he doesn't come out looking too great either. All right, we'll leave it there. Thank you, Patrick. And as always, thanks for coming on to the Real Estate Breakfast. I know that there are some Australian investors into the American market, and enjoy your day.
Thank you again for having me on. It's been a pleasure.
We connect you to the best real estate information across Australia. The Real Estate Podcast.